Hello, everyone. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast. My guest today is Celeste Miranda, founder of CBD and Cannabinoid Industry Association, MACE Media, and MS4MC. Happy Friday, Celeste. How are you?
I am great. Happy Friday to you too.
We made it, didn't we? It seemed like you would never.
I know.
How are things going on your end? Tell me where you're located.
I am in San Luis Obispo, California, which is by Pismo Beach, Central California. And yeah, lucky to be on the beach in a gorgeous area. So every day is Happy Friday over here. You know, it's, as they say, slow happy. So San Luis Obispo. So yeah, you know, we're lucky to be, you know, our core team in such a gorgeous place.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had numerous guests on from California, and I get so jealous when they talk about walks on the beach for meetings and being outside and whatnot. Because here in Dallas, Texas, it's getting colder. So
Yeah, you're in Dallas. That's you have quite a bit of extreme weather there, and plus don't don't hurricanes just like roll in whenever or whatever odd things go on there.
there's a lot going on. Yeah, the weather you can never really predict here, but one thing you can count on is very, very hot and humid summers. That's for sure. So,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So for those listening, just so that you're aware, I have Celeste Miranda on. She is the founder of CBD and Cannabinoid Industry Association, MACE Media, and MS4MC. Celeste, before we dive into your companies, you have a really amazing background in that you're a true testimonial when it comes to the efficacy of CBD, based on your lifelong battle with MS, right? So let's talk a little bit about your background and that moment when you turned to CBD as a therapeutic agent to address your MS.
Yeah, so it was about, I guess, going on 10 years now. It's about 9, 10 years ago, where I woke up one morning and just could not feel anything from my waist down. Like, you know, I could see myself when I would scratch my leg or touch my leg, but I could feel it. So it was a trip. It was crazy. And so I thought, well, something's wrong here, you know. So waited a little while and didn't go away. Went into the emergency room, and 18 hours later, they said, and many, many tests later, they said, you have multiple sclerosis. And I didn't even know what it was at the time. And they said, yeah, you have 3 lesions on your brain, 2 on your spine, and we're putting you in an ambulance, taking you up to Stanford, and you're going to go through an inpatient week-long infusion of steroids to get as much of your feeling back as we can get. So I was on my way to Stanford, and that started a very long personal battle with MS. And you know, originally the CBD thing came in to where Stanford had me on so many muscle relaxers for the spasticity that I was just looped. I couldn't even function. And it was at that point, I had a traditional marketing firm, and a friend of mine said, you know, we're starting to produce this gum. And he was actually a marketing client of mine. And he said, we're starting to produce this gum and it has CBD in it. And it's really helping this other friend of mine who has MS. And at the time, I had never even used, I was 40 years old, had never even used cannabis, had never anything. And first thing that came to me, of course, is what everybody else said 9, 10 years ago. Oh my God, I don't want to get high, blah, 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 right? Oh my God.
What
So,
is CBD, right? Like that general question. What's
right,
CBD? Yeah.
right. And then when he starts explaining, oh, it's from the cannabis plant, I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. And so he says, no, just try it. Doesn't make you high, all this stuff. So I said, okay. He's hit me some. I chewed the gum, And within 10 minutes, the spasticity went away. And I said, this can't be. It's gum. I said, there's no way. Tried it again, same thing happened. So I got off all the muscle relaxers and just started taking CBD. Found my little perfect point with it, and it was good.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about how your body reacted to the muscle relaxers. I know you touched on a little bit, and then also the steroids, right? I know that there's a lot of adverse side effects when it comes to steroids and muscle relaxers, opiates, things like that. So, how did that experience compare to this magical kind of remedy, right? When you started chewing gum with CBD in it, I mean, is probably like night and day.
Right. Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, I had never taken any sort of illegal drug or anything like that. And so when they had me on so many muscle relaxers, it was horrible. I couldn't even function. And it was just horrible. And so, but that's what I needed for the pain to go away. And so when I started the CBD, the pain went away, but I didn't, I wasn't in that state that the muscle relaxers put me in, and I was able to function and run my company. And that's when I switched over my whole marketing firm into cannabis, hemp, and CBD marketing. And that was like about 9 years ago. Everybody thought I was crazy. Colorado wasn't even legal yet. And they thought I was nuts. They were like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "No." I said, this will be something. There is something here. This can help people." And took the chance and switched everything over. And that slowly morphed from the Cannabis Marketing Lab, which is what it was at the time, into MACE Media Group, which is what it is today.
I really admire that, the fact that you took a leap, somewhat of faith at the time, right? Just because you were a believer with trying CBD and understanding firsthand how it helped you with your MS, right? And so what I admire the most is that you've kind of made that your mission for the past 10 plus years, to really advocate for CBD and then also provide that education. I mean, you've been busy. You have I called out 3 different companies, but I know that there's even other publishers within the MACE Media Group. So before we jump into specifically each of those entities, tell us really what your mission is for the industry as it relates to these companies, and what are you focused on?
Well, I think that it's obviously very personal for me, and that's why I got into this. I didn't get into it because, oh, cannabis is going to be a green revolution, or CBD is going to be the next trendy thing. I got into it all that time ago because it helped me. And when I think back to those times, all we were doing back then was telling people it won't get you high, it won't get you high. And we've come so far since then. But I think with everything I've done, with every step I've made, and I do have successful companies, but I also had ones that weren't successful, like any other entrepreneur. And I think through the journey, it's been interesting because it's not like any other industry. It wasn't like, I was saying, okay, I see this need, I'm going to fill it. I couldn't really do that because over here was these big regulatory agencies, that were making the industry change literally every day. So what I identified one day as being needed, the next day it could be, non-relevant because of something that was changed or done on the FDA's part or the DA's part or something like that. So it was interesting.
And I would imagine that, this analogy I say, kind of moving the goalpost, right? When it comes to this ever evolving regulation, especially during that time, that had to have been a challenge, especially because you transitioned your whole traditional marketing agency was it to cater specifically to cannabis related companies or CBD companies?
It was, yes. And I think that the hard part too was understanding the fine line, because CBD, it got me off of the muscle relaxers and things like that. But yet at the same time, I still go in every month to the chemo room and have an infusion of Tysabri. but it's only Thai Sabri and CBD. That's all I do that get me through it. So, I'm not, it was hard because I didn't want to say it was a miracle thing, because I think you still need um, pharmaceutical, structures at certain points. But it definitely, I think has its place and can help with many, many things.
Yeah, it's
So it was that fine line.
I'm glad that you brought that up because with all the misleading and false claims of CBD, like especially during COVID, like some company went out and said that it cures COVID, right? Um,
Right.
that only does a detriment for everyone, right? So I totally agree in that it's not the end all be all, but it is a great remedy to alleviate some ailments that you may have that may be better suited for your system, your body, compared to the opioids and maybe the other pain management prescriptions that are out there.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much we don't know still. You know what I mean? There's so much. One of the publications that I own is the Journal of Cannabinoid Medicine. And it has 3 different boards on it with research and peer review papers and all this stuff. And there's so much research going on CBN, CBG, CBC, that there's so much more that will come out yet, and it's just so interesting. CBD is just the start of it all.
Yeah, I mean, we've said it before on this podcast. I think there's projected to be over 150 cannabinoids in the plant, and we've only scratched the surface with like what, 11 or 10.
Right.
So that it just gets me so excited as this industry evolves, is as we just discover the different therapeutic properties and medicinal value that each cannabinoid has. It's going to be really exciting to see. But going back specifically to CBD, so you mentioned when you first started, you know it was a struggle just to kind of even have people understand this won't get you high, right? There's no psychoactive property within the CBD cannabinoid as opposed to THC. How much has that level of understanding progressed in the last 10 years since you've been on the front lines, really advocating and helping educate people around the plant?
Gosh, it has progressed so far. I mean, I remember back to our first CBD Expo even, and almost all of the panels and speakers were something about how it won't make you high, and how, it's okay and that sort of thing. And now to think about our conferences, in fact, we have one coming up in December in Houston even, and that's, you know, it's all so different. It's like, I don't think there is one panel that discusses how it won't make you high. So it's progressed amazingly. And, thankfully to all those physicians and researchers and even people who are just like me that it has helped, with the industry. But to answer the question, oh my gosh, leaps and bounds. We've progressed leaps and bounds, and that's even with no help from the FDA or DEA or any real entity that matters. So.
Right. Well, that's a great transition because myself, I come from a digital marketing background. I've been in the space, specifically in social media, for over 10 years now, working for large corporations, and now myself owning my own social media marketing agency and supporting clients. And what I'm interested about and somewhat frustrated about is what you just touched on, is the lack of consumer oversight when it comes to messaging and the sale of CBD products, right? And
Mhm.
that has been such a struggle, I know, with myself for my own businesses, the podcast, my brokerage, hemp brokerage business, but then also the clients that I support, is navigating the waters of the digital marketing challenges that are presented to the cannabis industry due to the lack of no consumer oversight, right? So how have you, especially being in this marketing space for cannabis for 10 years now, I mean, has it gotten better? Has it stayed the same? I mean, what does it look like from your perspective?
I remember when I had the cannabis marketing lab, and we had 60 clients in 6 different countries at one point. And it was always so interesting because we would wake up in the morning and it would be like, oh, let's see who Instagram shut down today. let's see who Facebook banned today, and literally that was the game. Like it was, you would wake up and it'd be like, oh God, what client has the crisis that has no Instagram page this morning? And, it's, at least we're not dealing with that. I mean, as much as that.
Well, that's so funny, and I'm curious. So to dive into that, like after encountering that issue so much of these accounts being shut down, and was there any kind of clear criteria as to why the channels were taken down, or was it kind of always at random? Like, were you ever able to pinpoint, okay, we shouldn't post that type of post this time, or we shouldn't do this because that'll get flagged by Instagram or Facebook? Or is it just all over the board with these platforms?
It was all over the board. It was so random. I mean, so random. And then you would go to say, okay, what happened to them? Facebook, why did the page go down? What happened? It's against our rules. That's the only thing you would ever hear. It's against our rules. It's against our rules. It's an illegal drug. It's against our rules. I mean, it was crazy. And then you worked so hard to get those 20,000 followers you had, and you had to start all over again. And so I don't think that we're facing those times anymore, like to that degree. We all understand you can't sell it through your social media channels is the main thing. And so a little more clarity has been brought through there, but it's, again, I don't do marketing anymore. I just now have the media companies, and it's so my finger isn't on the pulse as much. But boy, back in the day, oh my God, that was literally, that was crazy. That was crazy. And so, and that's one of the reasons that, once I was in the position to be a founder of the CBD Industry Association, I did, because it needed help. We needed help. There was nobody, I mean, there's a couple great organizations that focus on the cannabis space, but there was really no one to do that in the CBD space. So I'd say that was crazy. I haven't even thought of that in a long time.
Well, yeah, and it's so funny how how subjective Facebook can be. So first, when you said, they just said it's against our policy, it's a legal drug, like you'd be lucky to get that in a notification email or on the platform, because good luck getting in touch with anybody
Right,
walls of Facebook, right? Um,
right.
but not only that, it's like they're so subjective in that, like if you have a big budget and you're spending a lot of marketing dollars and you're kind of grandfathered in as a CBD or cannabis or hemp company, I should say,
Mhm.
they kind of bend the rules for you a little bit. You have a little more leeway as opposed to the companies that are bootstrapping and have a lesser budget. Um, so it is kind of a pay to play type structure they have.
That's very true. And we saw that, even back in the day,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you, if we could have thrown our bodies across a railroad track to keep an Instagram page up, we would have. It was crazy, but yeah, we've come a long way. So at least that's a good thing. But
Yeah, I've received the yellow card where it's like your warning, like you have violated our terms, and your heart kind of stops for a second. You're like, am I locked out? What happened? So you're right. They're not as abrupt in shutting you down, but it is a challenge.
it
And
is.
and speaking of those challenges, so I think there's a lot of unintended consequences, and I've talked about this before on the podcast, where without this federal regulation, there's been a lot of unintended consequences that are really hurting a lot of the good actors within the space, right? um we know that been an emergence of fraud and snake oil in the market, where some or most products that are sourced, especially from Amazon and other places, they don't even contain CBD in them, or they have really high levels of metals and pesticides and things that are really bad for you.
Mhm.
So I mean, it's frustrating, right? I mean, is that what you're kind of seeing across the board too, when it comes to the lack of oversight?
Absolutely. There are no standards. I mean, and that's one of the problems too, is that, you'll get a bottle, of CBD, and you'll look on it and you'll read it and you go, oh, okay, it says this and that. But then they go to test it and it's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
And so that hurts the industry so bad. And it's gotten, around that, labels aren't accurate, nothing is accurate, nothing is standardized, nothing is tested. And it's true, like let's take wine, for instance. You have your Pinot, you have your Cab, you have, your Chardonnay. When you drink one of those wines, you know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're drinking certain grapes, probably from specific regions, and you know what to expect. You're drinking a Pinot grape,
Right.
that sort of thing. And unfortunately, not only CBD, but cannabis doesn't have that. The strains, there's no regulation. You can take a purple haze and from this dispensary and smoke it, and you could take a purple haze from this dispensary and smoke it. It's not the same, but they're both called purple haze. So I mean, you can go all the way with this problem from labels with CBD products, all the way to flower in dispensaries with cannabis. There just is no regulation. And unfortunately, until it becomes federally legal, there's not going to be, because there aren't those funds to put into it to create that process.
Mm-hmm.
And for any private entity to do that is so expensive. It's in the millions of dollars to even start a process such as that it's going to be very, very hard to do. Or the FDA jumping on board. That would be another way, to fast track it, is for the FDA to say, okay, we're approving this. It can be used as an additive here and there. Well, then that opens up, money for additional research and, mapping and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, if federal, if removing the Schedule 1 from the federal regulation happens, obviously, we would see more regulations and things put in place. But because the 2018 Farm Bill was passed, right, where we now allow for mass cultivation of hemp, which is a plant that has 0.3 or less THC in it, which is legal, according to the federal government. You would think that the FDA would start to move on this, but I mean, is your feeling that they're just kind of waiting because of that Schedule 1 still?
Correct. Absolutely. They're waiting for the Schedule 1. And the thing is it's so contradictory. Everything contradicts itself. The hemp bill contradicts FDA. FDA contradicts the hemp bill. None of it works together or makes sense. And I think a big thing is the pharmaceutical industry. That's a huge issue. Unfortunately, until there's a way for them to make money in this, these larger organizations are not going to jump on board, because it's too much of a money game. And I'm one, and we've touched on this in Terpenes and Testing, which is a magazine I own, as well as the journal. And it's I'm somebody who's all for the plant. Most definitely. There's nothing like getting your cannabinoids from a natural source. 100%. But my editor of the journal and I were just discussing, we have to accept research and white papers on synthetic cannabinoids. We don't have a choice, because of the reason being that the pharmaceutical companies will never make money off of a plant. They can't. Anybody can grow it. They can't make money off that. They can't patent it. They can't own it. They can't, anybody could do it. So in order for the pharma companies to jump in this game, it has to be through synthetics. And even if at the worst case scenario, we need to do that right now and today in order for people to get the help they need from these cannabinoids, then we have to do it while we wait for the plant to get federally legal or whatever. But it has so much to do with the pharma industry.
What do you mean by synthetics? Do you mean like a man-made cannabinoid, like in a lab, as opposed to it being grown naturally through the plant?
I do, with yeast. Yeah.
Huh. Okay, so that's a new topic for me. Let's expand on that a bit. So, lab-made cannabinoids. What's the pros and cons with that? I would imagine more cons than pros.
More cons and pros, especially for from the people who are supportive of the plant. And I get that. I get it. That is the best case scenario. But Yes, they are growing cannabinoids, and you should research this. You should know about this. They're growing cannabinoids from yeast in labs. And, it's coming out very, very, very close, if not exact. And, of course, like I said, secondary, choice. But for right now, if that's what it's going to take to get the FDA to open this up, because the pharma companies now are in the game, then that's what needs to happen today. Because remember, the point is to help people. That should be our number one priority.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm definitely going to beef up on synthetic cannabinoids. That's really the first time I've heard it. I'm not surprised because I mean we're seeing lab grown meat now and other things. Yeah, but that is very interesting. Wow. So along these lines, like because we're waiting on the FDA to present these guidelines, how confident are you in HR 8179, which is the Hemp and Hemp-Derived CBD Consumer Protection and Market Stabilization Act of 2020? I believe that bill was proposed by a representative from Oregon and Virginia, which is a bipartisan, a Democrat and a Republican. So is that basically kind of labeling CBD as a dietary supplement, or?
It is. It is. And, it's another play to try to get the FDA to throw some bones at it. You know what I mean? And so, most people and entities I've talked to in the industry are in support of it, but it's really just an additional play to try to get the FDA to fall. And, hopefully it'll provide the evidence that they need to do that.
Does it have much legs to get past, or I mean, I guess I hear what you're saying is that it's just a way to kind of nudge the FDA to say, hey, we're trying to make something happen here, we need some help. But I mean, do you foresee that being passed or not?
I think it's so 50-50. I think a lot of it depends on what happens politically. I think a lot of it depends on, um, if the FDA makes any more moves between now and then. I would lean more towards that it will probably, hopefully, be passed. I think it's 60-40 game right now, but we'll see. We're trying to assist it as well.
Is that being voted on election day, or how is that? How does that
I
work?
believe it is. I think so.
Okay, got you. So yeah, I mean, a lot to see what happens right after the third. It's going to be
I
an
know.
week.
I know.
And for those probably listening, this was recorded before the election, so you will already know what's happened once this airs. But just wanted to throw that out there as a caveat. Um, so Celeste, let's talk about some other unintended consequences. Another being like the Safe Banking Act, right? And the hesitation for these private banks to step in and work with cannabis companies due again to the federal scheduling as it being under the Controlled Substances Act. So again, right, this is political. We're gonna have to see how things shake out after the election. But what is kind of your viewpoint for this issue?
I think the Safe Banking Act has a very, very good chance of of flying through. Just because of the fact that there's so much money um, that can be made off of it being put through. And for a lot of people, not only for the banks, but for a lot of different entities, that legalized banking will open the industry up to. So, something like that, I think something like the restrictions on banking can only last so long in this industry, and I think its archaic moments have way passed. So I definitely think that we'll see that put through. But again, the only reason that it has to possibly not is because of the federally illegal portion.
Mm-hmm.
And the proponents, it'll be interesting. They'll say there's so much money out there that's being skipped over, etc. But until the whole thing, so much of it relies on the fact of until it's federally legal. Because if for some reason that safe banking doesn't go through, that is the only reason.
Right. I have two follow-up questions on this topic, but I don't want to lose my thought here. So, what do you know about the single convention within the UN?
I don't know much about that at all. I haven't heard, I've heard a little bit about it, and I've listened to a few discussions about it, but I really, as far as to speak on it, I don't know enough
I,
about it.
I ask you not as a gotcha question, but more of like
Yeah,
I just learned about this, and
yeah.
what I'm starting to realize is that yes, we're all adamant about the federal regulations being overturned, right, and removing the Schedule One. But what I've realized is that this is even a bigger issue where within the UN and the G7 nations, they've all signed a basically a treaty or an agreement, which is the Single Convention on Narcotics.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically that we're pledging to the UN and the WHO, because I think that's where kind of it rolls under,
Yeah, it's good.
is where cannabis is, internationally listed as a Schedule One. So we talk a lot about at the federal level, but I think this even goes further, right? And Canada being the first G7 nation to go fully legal, kind of broke away from that. And I don't know exactly what the repercussions have been, if there's been sanctions or what, but it goes beyond just here at home, I think.
Yeah, and that's true. I don't, it's interesting because of the way it works is it always, as you go down, regulations can be tightened from a higher entity to a lower entity, from the state to the counties to the cities or whatever. It can always be, you know, niche down even more, anything. But, I think that that's true to an extent. But I also think that in that particular situation, they have to look at Canada. And if they're going to do something in there, they have to look. Canada hasn't sunk. Canada hasn't caught on fire. Canada isn't full of a bunch of stoners and drug addicts. You know what I mean? And so I think that we can also use that if it's going to play out that way. I think it can also be used to say, hey, look,
Right.
and so I don't know, we'll see. We're dealing with a lot of different countries and different rules and regs. In fact, we just licensed CBD Expo to Brazil. And it's interesting, they've opened up with for CBD, but for import only. So all these United States companies, this is a good tip, if to really kind of get your business going right now, look at Brazil. They can only bring it in by import only. And so that's relying on companies from the US, from Europe, from all these places to have a whole nother distribution stream, revenue stream by importing into Brazil. But the thing is they niched it down even more to be less than 0.01. So okay, you need another tweak, but if you do that, you can definitely really jumpstart an additional leg of your product with export into Brazil. You got to go, of course, through the paperwork and some red tape, but if you're one of the first products to do that, I think that it would definitely be a bump up in your CBD business.
Yeah, no, that's a great tip. It's just funny. We go back to moving the goalposts and it's like, oh, you got this great opportunity to import in Brazil, but wait, now you got to meet the threshold of point one, right?
Yeah,
And which in some cases could be virtually impossible given that THCV is naturally occurring in the plant, right? It kind of serves as a defense mechanism for the sun. So it's just so interesting that they put those kind of nuances in place. And to add on to that, I could be wrong about this, but I think what I read before, of course, everything that's happened in China and everything, is that they pledged to allow like billions of pounds of hemp imported to their country as well. So I don't know if that's changed or what, but I know that China was open to U.S. importation of hemp. Uh,
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you're right. If you look at the international landscape, there are a lot of opportunities if you can get yourself in the door.
There are, and I think that's what, during this COVID thing and all this, a lot of these CBD companies have had a hard time and are struggling. But I think you just have to be creative, think outside the box, and look at international opportunities. Same with Germany. Same with I think Hong Kong was another place with import. I think there's five of them,
Mhm.
5 countries that are on that status. And so look into those. You do have to do some work and you do have to do some tweaking but it could be a huge revenue stream, just huge. And I know it has to be pharmaceutical grade, meet what their definition of a pharmaceutical grade is, that sort of thing. But don't overlook it. Definitely, an opportunity is there.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for that tip. And I'm sure that myself, I appreciate it, and those listening also. One other thing I want to touch on as it relates to banking is your experience.
Yeah.
Given that you're a business owner of a large media company, and all these other companies that I want to dive into after this, is like, have you, because your nature of your business doesn't necessarily directly touch the plant, like, have you had struggles with working with banks and whatnot?
God, yes. It's been horrible. PayPal was the worst. PayPal shut us down and kept a large sum of capital that we had and held it for 6 months,
Wow.
the longest period they could. And that was early on in our in our gestation, whew, try to survive that. That was a big bulk of our savings and our income that we had in there, and they held it for 6 months, and we had to operate and start like literally start all over again, those 6 months, and it was horrible. And I've been, but of course we've been let go from Stripe has been horrible to deal with. So many different banks and things like that. But there's also ones that have been very good. Square, if anybody's out there looking for a payment processor, I know there's a lot right now saying, oh, we process CBD, we're great at CBD, blah, blah, blah. Some of them are, but again, most of them are going to have really high rates. But if you're in the CBD space, definitely 100%. And I have no interest in saying this, but in a financial way, but Square has been excellent to us. So definitely, they're real about wanting to help the CBD space.
Sure. No, that's great. And the others that you mentioned that may be open to working with you, they just kind of they gouge you in terms of their service fees
Great.
and all
Mhm.
that.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's horrible,
Yeah.
horrible.
Again, and it just goes back to those unintended consequences, right? Of not having any regulation, it being the wild, wild west, and the good actors that are trying to do the right thing and run a legitimate business, they're just running into all these issues, man. They need.
I know. And if you think you're going to, trick them by saying, oh, I have a different company name or the parent company is different or whatever, that's only, and you might get your account open, but it's only going to last for a second. They're going to look at your website. They're going to research you. They're going to do all this, and eventually they're going to shut you down. And unfortunately, they're going to hold your money while they're doing it. So just from the onset, don't even try. It's unfortunate, and it's BS, but we've we've lived with this now, my companies for 10 years, and I think any other industry at this point would be boring. I don't even know.
Instead of playing the game of who got shut down on Instagram, it's like, is my
Right,
bank gonna shut me down today, kind of thing, right?
right.
Oh man. Well, hopefully we can look back in years to come and laugh like we are now, but a little more because we're not in it, you know.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, seriously.
but that time will come. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, you know.
Yeah, it will.
So Celeste, tell me about CBD and Cannabinoid Industry Association. What is y'all's mission? What do you do? And then I want to get into MACE Media Group.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so CBD, the CBD Industry Association, which is actually really the Cannabinoid Industry Association, I founded that probably about a year and a half ago. And I did it because the industry needed help. And that was it. And it needed help from a governmental standpoint, a political standpoint. And so that's what we wanted to do. And so I went out there and asked the best, most aggressive players in the industry I knew to sit on a board. And I found an amazing executive director in Grace L. Moreno, and they've taken it and they've just taken the bull by the horns and ran with it. We have a political activist that's very, very involved in Washington on the Hill, and the board is just amazing. And it's interesting because, and I knew it would happen, but once you form an association like that, a trade association, all of a sudden CBS is calling you for their interviews, NBC, ABC, CNN, because you're the association. You're the voice of the industry. And so, and that's what I wanted. Like, I wanted them to be able to have a source to go to for us to get our information out there more, us being the CBD industry as a whole.
Hmm.
And so it's worked. We're about 250 members strong at this point. And I think even more than that, we've opened chapters in Latin America. They have a huge chapter going down there. The board members there are so amazing, the caliber of them. They just blow you away, from universities there, and it's just the research universities. It's amazing. Mexico's starting a chapter. We have several state chapters now. So it's really gaining momentum. And believe me, for the first while, it was a passion project for sure, and still is. But, it's definitely necessary. I've self-funded all of my businesses. And, I will continue to put into CBDIA whatever is needed. The memberships help greatly. Everybody who wants to help make a difference. So, and then under that, we started the cannabinoid medicine studies, which are the certification programs that CBDIA endorses. And I think we have something like 12 certification programs under there through the association. And all of the programs are physician or PhD written, the curriculum, and PhD or physician taught at our conferences live. And so, they're also online, the majority of them, and we're getting them all up. So those provide a great educational platform too through the association.
That's amazing. And I mean, a follow-up question with that. So, how do you source these physicians and these medical experts? I mean, from my conversations with other medical experts on the podcast, they've admitted that during their tenure in college or university and learning in their studies, very rarely did the endocannabinoid system come up. So, are these doctors that have kind of moved to look and focus more on alternative therapeutics like CBD, or are they hyper focused on just this?
I think first of all, the only reason that I've even been able to do this or anything that I do in the industry anymore is because after 10 years, if Rolodexes were still alive, mine would be like stacked a mile high. You know what I mean? And it's been super important to me to remain credible in the industry and to have a good reputation in my companies to do so. And so, we try to be honest, we try to be real, we try to be, as transparent as possible. And so you put that together with the 10 years, and, I know a lot of people, and, the physicians I've just built relationships with over the years, with the magazines and them writing the articles, with the conferences and them speaking. And, it has been a challenge to, I wouldn't say to find them, because they all really believe in cannabinoid medicine and endocannabinoid medicine. But it has been a challenge to bring them out. You know what I mean? And to get them in the public eye and supporting this in the public eye, because they don't want it to hurt their practices, and that's understandable. They
Yeah.
don't want it to hurt their reputation, their practices. And so, but as the industry progresses, we're seeing less and less of that. And so, these physicians, these professors, all of these people, they're much more willing to come out now and to say, no, there's some science to this. And so, I think that just needed time, to be honest with you. I think that just needed time and progression, and for the physicians to realize that, not everyone's going to agree with you, but you're not going to be blacklisted because of this. So,
Right. Yeah. And I mean, with so much growing support for legalization and just cannabis overall, I see how that could happen, right? It's just a matter of time where these physicians, these professors, these medical experts, they become more comfortable with talking about it, just because that stigma is starting to slowly go away, right?
right. And it got to be less about weed, in air quotes, if you're listening to this, and more about the endocannabinoid, the science of the endocannabinoid system. Once it was discovered, we have one, and it's based upon the cannabinoids that come from the cannabis plant. And regardless of what else is surrounding that, that's a fact.
Mm.
And so, it's been interesting. It's been fun. And, I have to say, I'm so grateful and so honored to work with some of the researchers and physicians and people that we do. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
No, absolutely. I mean, they're going to be the catalyst to really legitimize cannabis as being the future of medicine, right? So it's good that you're leveraging your huge Rolodex over the past 10 years to, to bring the right people together to help convey that message.
Yeah.
It's great. And, one other follow-up question with this is, you mentioned earlier the Journal of Cannabinoid Medicine. You talked about a lot of the research and things that the medical professionals that you're working with are doing.
Mhm.
Is there any challenges when it comes to like actual human trial testing? Of course, given no consumer oversight and whatnot, it's basically you can't do human study trials. So how are they getting these findings in this research?
So here's the thing is that, again, you're going to find the companies that have gone the furthest with their clinical trials, which is phase 2, that sort of thing, that have passed phase 1 at least, are synthetic cannabinoids. And again, it's because they have less barriers. So, there's a couple of companies out there that we deal with and work with, and in fact, some are on the board even of the journal, that are doing that, or on the board of CBDIA as well, that are heading up companies that are in phase 2 clinical trials. And so it's mainly performed on lab rats, at the moment. And but several of those companies have been able to go to phase 2 or further. Um, and so that human thing comes into play if it's based upon synthetics. So that's what I'm saying. I'm all for the plant, and I always get bashed when I mention synthetics. But first choice the plant, but second choice, do what you got to do to get us where we need to be,
Yeah.
with the plant. And so, just that's kind of what's happening right now with the trials.
Yeah, no, I mean, beggars can't be choosers at this point, right? I mean, we got to pick our battles. And to your point, right, if we really want to make some headway when it comes to the learnings and findings of the medicinal properties of cannabis and CBD and other things, we got to do what we got to do at this point. We don't have help. So I'm totally for that. And I'm with you. So now let's talk about MACE Media. So, yeah, I mean, you're busy, like I said. So let's talk a little bit about the different publications within Mace Media and the overall mission for that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, MACE is definitely my heart. It's where I put my blood and soul into, and we have 5 publications that we currently publish: Terpenes and Testing Magazine, Extraction Magazine, CBD Health and Wellness Magazine, Hemp Farmer Magazine, and the Journal of Cannabinoid Medicine. And again, I'm very grateful for the editors of each. My editorial team, I would put them up against anybody. They're amazing. But each of those magazines, the oldest being Terpenes and Testing, which most people know, um, they bring different aspects into the industry. Terpenes and Testing is so scientific. I can't read it and understand anything, but and then Extraction Magazine, of course, is very scientific on the extraction side. CBD Health and Wellness is our one that's a little more consumer based. Hemp Farmer, my heart goes out to the ag industry that's changing over their corn to hemp and things like that. And that's what that was for. And then, of course, the journal to further our position with entities like the FDA and that sort of thing to provide evidence. So my publications kind of round out, I think, as much as I could to help the industry. Each publication has an event, a conference that goes with it. And then obviously in COVID in 2020, we've had to push all those to 2021, except for one of them. We will be having Houston CBD Expo South in December with approval from the state, the city, the county, venue, and all that. So we'll see how that goes. But with Terpenes and Testing, that was Canna Farm Con, is a conference that goes with that. And we have that every year. With Extraction Magazine, Concentration is the conference that goes with that. It's a conference just about extraction, very popular one. And then CBD Health and Wellness is the CBD Expo Tour, which has usually about 8 stops a year in major different cities. So we're on the road a lot. And then of course, I founded CBDIA and the Cannabinoid Medicine Studies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we're at, and it's kind of interesting because I'm able to use my platforms to help things like the CBD Industry Association. And I'm not ashamed to do that. You know what I mean? And it's like, if Terpenes and Testing or CBD Health and Wellness magazines can do anything to further this CBD Industry Association, we do that. And so it's kind of a trifecta that all works together. And so we've just been, our events division, of course, took a huge hit with COVID. But we were lucky to be diversified and have the magazines and keep not only us rolling, but the companies we work with, the CBD companies. So that was important.
Celeste, you got a clue. I'll tell you that. I mean, just like my dad would say as I was growing up, you want to do everything with a purpose, right? So that makes complete sense how, you're kind of well-rounded and positioned within the industry where you can cover so many different topics, but then utilize the information that you're putting out for those topics to help kind of push forward the association, like you mentioned, and really start to arm the FDA and other governmental agencies with the information they need to push things forward, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Was that all part of the plan initially, or did it all? I'm sure it was, but I mean, did this all come together serendipitously, or was this the plan?
No, sometimes you're just somewhere and something hits you and you're like, hey, that'll work or that'll be good with this. And like I said, I've had a lot of things that failed too. But as with MS, you have a good day, you have a bad day, but you get up and you don't stay down and you keep trying and you figure out something that does work. And so, it I cannot ever say it was the whole plan to begin with, but it quickly came together. And I can't say I try to always promise my staff no more companies, no more companies, but I have to say that if something came up that could really, really help the industry get where it needs to go, I would have to for sure look at it. So
Well, maybe a podcast. I mean, you're very well
there
spoken.
you go.
Know a lot, so
Or I can just bring you over to do one of ours. How about that?
I would love it. I would love to do that. Yes, you could add me to your Rolodex. So
There you go. There you go.
awesome, Celeste. Well, hey, let's leave on possibly a high note. Like, tell us what you see the future of CBD being in terms of research, consumer adoption, regulation, etc.
I do see the light at the end of the tunnel. We've come too far and worked too hard. And, I think that, people are smart, and I don't think that the FDA, the DEA, the government, the federal government, I don't think anyone can continue to give reasons why it shouldn't be legal. And I think they've tried. I think they've continued to try as much as they can, but I think that road has run out, you know? And I think the good now is far outweighing the bad. And even like when I open our conferences, you know, I say, I want them, anybody from the FDA, the DEA, doesn't matter. I want them to tell me it doesn't work because I have MS and I know it does. And so I want them to tell me why it's illegal, why they think it doesn't work, why they think it harms people, because I know. And I think that I will use that position as much as I can to help this industry. And another thing is there's been a lot of conferences that the DA has stormed in and shut down and this and that crazy stuff. And that's never happened with ours, and only because of one reason. And that's because I personally call them and invite them there. And I will call the sheriff of wherever we are, the DEA. I will call the FDA. Please come join us at our conference. We'd love to educate you, and we want you to tell us what your concerns are. And they have come, and several times we've had panels, put them on panels with them. And it's, that's always fun. And so, I think that we have to stop hiding. I think we have to put it out there like that. We have nothing to be ashamed of, and we're doing nothing wrong. And it's helped me, and I'm trying to help others. And I know that we can, and the science is there. And so I do see it changing. I do see things getting easier, getting better. I think the banking will go through. I think we have a few years before federal legalization, but I think between now and then, the FDA will have to do something in our direction because, again, they can't. They're running out of reasons not to.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think we have nowhere to go but up, honestly.
Celeste, you're a badass. That is, I love that approach. How you're like, you know what? I live it every day, and I am a living testament of the efficacy of CBD. And you know what? Let's have a conversation.
Yeah,
Talk about it because, to your point, we're getting tired of, like you said, the reasons why
yeah,
it's illegal, as opposed to really starting to look toward the benefits, right? Because the benefits certainly outweigh the negatives, right? Uh,
absolutely. Look, they approved alcohol is legal. Alcohol kills people,
right.
but you're going to stand up there and tell me you don't have enough evidence that CBD will not harm someone. Oh my God. Are you just, it's a joke. It's a joke. And again, the problems go deeper. It involves pharmaceutical industry. It involves a lot of things. And so, but people can only hide for so long. It'll come out.
Right, exactly. Well, I have an idea for our first podcast. We'll bring on a policymaker who is abruptly against legalization, and we'll have him go toe to toe with you and have a conversation. I would love it. Let's do it.
I am ready. Let's do it.
Awesome. Hey, well, Celeste, I really have enjoyed talking with you today. You're so easy to talk to, and you're very knowledgeable, obviously, on the subject. And I've said this before. My mission for this podcast is to really just ultimately remove the stigma associated with cannabis, and just educate and inform people in regards to all aspects of the plant, whether it's the legality, the science, the consumer adoption, all that kind of stuff. And so I really admire people like you who are doing the same thing, right? But in a different way. I mean, you got all your media publications, you're putting out great content that speaks to different topics within the industry, and it's so desperately needed. So continue to keep blazing the trails, and we'll just start to see more companies emerge as this industry emerges.
Oh my gosh. And thank you to you too for everything you do. It's people like you that get it out there and get the information out, and you're great at what you do too. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. And I definitely want to have you on again real soon as things develop and policies change. So if you're open to that, I would love it.
Absolutely. Anytime. Just let me know.
Cool. Well, thank you so much again, Celeste. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll talk to you again next time. Bye.